The Chinese authorities have taken tough action to try to suppress the widespread protests against the country's COVID restrictions. President Xi has not faced a challenge like this before, and it's the first time since the zero COVID policy started that people have marched against the president and against the government, with protests spreading to some of China's biggest cities. Police are out in force, and there are renewed fears about the fate of some of those being detained. Now, China has been in almost perpetual lockdown for over 2 years. Several people were detained in Shanghai. That is China's biggest city, and that is where police have been placing barriers to block further demonstrations. Now, where did this start? Well, the latest protest began over in the northwest, in the city of Urumqi, where 10 people died in a fire, amid claims that the lockdown had in fact hampered the rescue efforts. The protest then spread quickly to other cities, including Chengdu, Wuhan, Nanjing, and the capital, Beijing. Our China correspondent, Stephen McDonald, has the latest, and there is some flash photography coming up.
The Chinese capital became the latest city with a demonstration calling for an end to the country's COVID restrictions. The symbol of this movement has become white sheets of paper, with protesters holding them up to signify the way in which people are silenced here by official censorship. They're chanting that strict lockdowns and compulsory testing should stop. But dissatisfaction with the government's handling of the crisis is also spilling over into calls for press freedom and democracy.
Freedom! We want freedom, not unlimited government power. We want the rule of law. We don't want the next generation to live in this era of horror.
Zero COVID in China has meant trying to return each outbreak to zero infections, using strict stay-at-home orders, travel bans and phone apps tracking people's movements. Entire cities are sometimes officially locked down or effectively closed with businesses shut. Yet COVID-19 continues to spread. The country posted record new case numbers over the past 5 days in a row. Last month, the country's leader, Xi Jinping, said there'd be no swerving from the current approach as he entered a historic third term in power. Now, protesters in the southwestern city of Chengdu are blaming him personally for allowing the COVID crisis to continue. They've criticised his lifetime leadership entitlement and said their country doesn't need an emperor. This followed earlier calls in Shanghai for Xi Jinping to step down and for the Communist Party to give up power. At the site where protesters clashed with police, barriers have gone up to stop crowds gathering again. Passers-by taking photos are being forced to delete them, and there's a heavy police presence in the area. Waves of anger initially spread across China following an apartment block fire in Xinjiang last week, which killed 10 residents. People have blamed COVID restrictions for hampering the access of firefighters and blocking escape routes. The Chinese government says this isn't true.
Forces with ulterior motives have used social media to link the fire to the zero COVID policy, but the local government has combated these rumours and smears.
Either way, these protests have unleashed discontent, which has been not very far below the surface.
One of the problems in China is that nobody knows when zero COVID will end. If the government has a plan, it's not told people what it is. And so the belief that this could go on forever is causing a lot of consternation amongst the general public.
Xi Jinping's administration has had years to prepare for an eventual opening up, but spent that time telling its citizens how lucky they were to live in China. Now, there's widespread unrest, and it doesn't seem to have a clear way out.